Ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, many assumed the American military presence in Germany would fade into history. But here we are, decades later, and over 50,000 US personnel still call Germany home. Spread across dozens of installations, from the forests of Bavaria to the industrial heartlands of the Rhineland, these men and women serve as the backbone of American operations throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Germany is breathtaking. The alpine villages, the medieval castles perched on hillsides, the endless forests that seem to whisper secrets from another age. It's a country steeped in history, where every cobblestone street has a story to tell. But beneath that postcard beauty lies something else, something the travel brochures don't mention. The Germans themselves have always known it. Their folklore is darker than most, filled with creatures that lurk in shadows and prowl through moonlit woods. Witches, goblins, shapeshifters, werewolves. Most of us grew up thinking these were just fairy tales, stories to scare children into behaving. But ask the soldiers in today's stories, and they'll tell you something different. They'll tell you that in the remote training areas and ancient forests where they conduct their exercises, childhood nightmares have a way of becoming terrifyingly real. This is the smoke pit, and these are the stories soldiers don't talk about in official reports. Let me take you to Bavaria, to a place called Grafenwöhr. The locals just call it the GTA. It's the largest US Army training facility outside American soil, over 90 square miles of forests, firing ranges and maneuver areas. The German military established it back in 1910, but after World War II ended, it came under new management, American management. If you've served in the army and spent time in Europe, chances are you've been to Grafenwöhr. It's where units come to train for real-world deployments. The terrain is unforgiving, the weather unpredictable, and the training schedule relentless. But according to some soldiers, that's not the only thing that makes the GTA challenging. A few years back, members of a reconnaissance platoon were running a nighttime exercise deep in the Grafenwöhr forests. Standard stuff. One team sets up a hidden observation post. The other team tries to find them hours later. It's a game of hide and seek, but with night vision goggles, thermal optics, and a whole lot of pride on the line. The tracking team rolled out around 0100 hours. They parked their ground mobility vehicle on a remote access road and continued on foot. The forest was thick that night, the kind of darkness that seems to press in on you from all sides. They moved slowly, methodically, scanning the tree lines with their equipment. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Then they heard it, rustling in the brush off to their right. At first, nobody thought much of it. Probably a deer, maybe a wild boar. Germany has plenty of both, and they're always wandering through training areas looking for food. One of the soldiers switched his night vision to thermal mode. The display flickered to life, painting the world in shades of heat signature. And there it was, a figure standing in the tree line. It looked human at first glance. Bipedal, upright posture. But something was wrong. Even through the thermal distortion, they could tell this thing was too thin, too tall. Its limbs were elongated, almost exaggerated, like someone had taken a human form and stretched it on a rack. And its skin, even in the green glow of night vision, appeared deathly pale. The team approached cautiously. They figured it was one of the sniper team playing around, maybe trying to spook them as part of the exercise. It wouldn't be the first time soldiers pulled pranks during training. But then the figure stood up straight, all the way up. It towered over them, hunched slightly forward, and just watched. Motionless, silent. One of the soldiers called out, identifying their unit. No response. The figure just stared. And then, without warning, it bolted. The speed was inhuman. 1 second it was standing there, the next it was crashing through the underbrush, moving so fast the thermal signature blurred across their displays. Within seconds, it had vanished into the darkness. Training kicks in at moments like that. Without thinking, the team gave chase. They crashed through the forest, boots pounding the earth, branches whipping at their faces. They could hear it ahead of them, breaking through vegetation, moving deeper and deeper into the woods. And then the growl came. It wasn't like any animal sound they'd ever heard. Deep, guttural, wrong. It had this quality to it, this resonance that seemed to vibrate in their chests. Part animal, yes, but there was something else mixed in, something that sounded almost human. Almost. The team stopped dead. Every tactical instinct they had was screaming at them to get out of there. This wasn't part of the training exercise. This was something else entirely. They pulled back to their vehicle and radioed the other team. The sniper team confirmed they were on the opposite side of the training area, nowhere near where this encounter had taken place. No other units were scheduled to be in that sector. Later, back at the barracks, one of the team members mentioned the encounter to some guys from another platoon. That's when things got interesting. Turns out, the previous year, soldiers from that same platoon had reported seeing something similar, a pale, impossibly thin humanoid figure moving through the same area. At the time, everyone figured they were sleep-deprived or messing around. Nobody was laughing anymore. Recon soldiers are trained observers, snipers even more so. These aren't people who jump at shadows or mistake a deer for a monster. They're taught to identify targets at extreme distances, to distinguish friend from foe in split-second decisions. And they all saw the same thing, something that shouldn't exist. But here's what bothers me most about that story. It's not an isolated incident. Similar encounters have been reported throughout Germany for centuries. The Germans call them different names depending on the region, but the description is always similar. Pale skin, elongated limbs, moves like nothing natural. Some researchers have connected these sightings to what's known in cryptozoology as the Pale Crawler or the Rake. These entities appear in folklore from cultures all over the world, from Native American legends to African tribal stories. But in Germany, they have another interpretation for creatures that hunt in the darkness. Shapeshifters, werewolves. Let me tell you about Richard. Richard was a US Army veteran who developed a passion for European history during his time stationed in Germany. Unlike some soldiers who spent their off-duty hours at the bar, Richard preferred exploring. He'd visit Roman ruins, medieval castles, anywhere with a story to tell. He wanted to understand the real Germany, not just the sanitized version you see in tourist guides. One winter, Richard decided to visit the town of Schwangau in Bavaria. You might know it as the home of Neuschwanstein Castle, that fairy tale fortress that inspired Disney. The area was hosting winter festivals, and Richard figured it would be a great way to experience authentic German culture. He found a room at a local hostel run by a friendly German couple. They were older, gracious hosts who seemed genuinely pleased to have an American guest who respected their culture. Richard spent his days exploring and his evenings on the hostel's balcony, enjoying the views and the occasional beer with his hosts. The hostel sat on the outskirts of town, near the Autobahn. Their balcony overlooked a small wooded area. Some parts were well lit by street lamps, others disappeared into shadow. One evening, Richard made a casual comment about hoping nothing scary would get him out here in the countryside. His host laughed, a deep, knowing laugh that made Richard pay attention. The old man said something Richard would never forget. Historically, we have our fair share of monsters in this area. If you know your history, you know of the werewolf. Richard settled back with his drink, ready for a good story, and the old man delivered. Back in the 14th or 15th century, the area wasn't one city but 3 separate villages. Records from that time are sparse, distorted by the passage of centuries, but the story has survived in the collective memory of the people who live there. One summer, the villagers were preparing for a harvest festival. The crops had been good, the work was nearly done, and everyone was looking forward to celebrating. But that afternoon, a small child stumbled into the village square, covered head to toe in blood. The villagers recognized her. She was from the neighboring village, less than an hour's walk away. They tried to help her, tried to stop the bleeding, but her injuries were too severe. Before she died, the child managed to tell them what had happened. A beast had attacked her village, a monster that killed everyone. The men grabbed their weapons, pitchforks, axes, whatever they could find, and set out for the neighboring village. Along the way, they found farmsteads that had been destroyed, cattle slaughtered by the dozens, homes torn apart, bodies that looked like they'd been ripped to pieces by wild animals. When they reached the second village, they found the same devastation. Not a single living soul, no people, no livestock, nothing, just blood and silence and the overwhelming stench of death. The hunting party pressed on to the third village, the furthest one, praying they'd find survivors. At first it seemed deserted like the others, but then they heard sounds coming from the main hall. Movement. Something was alive in there. The village leader called out, demanding whoever was inside to show themselves. What answered was a howl that froze the blood in their veins. One brave man rushed the door, trying to force his way inside to confront whatever was in there. The door exploded outward. The man was thrown back like a rag doll, his body broken, and then the door slammed shut. The hunting party made a decision. They couldn't fight this thing, whatever it was. So they did the only thing they could think of. They set the hall on fire. They surrounded it with torches and watched it burn to ash. They stood there for hours, weapons ready, waiting for something to come running out. Nothing did. Whatever had massacred 3 villages died in those flames. When the old man finished his story, Richard felt a chill run down his spine despite the warm evening. He asked if there were other stories like that. The old man's expression grew serious. People around here don't like going out after dark. Even those who've lived here their whole lives feel it. Something about the night doesn't sit right. And speaking of the werewolf, even speaking its name, that's supposed to invite bad luck. Richard was about to respond when he noticed something. Movement at the edge of the tree line below the balcony. He pointed, and both men leaned forward to look. Something was standing there in the moonlight. Its height was wrong. Its proportions were wrong. It stood on 2 legs, but the posture was all wrong, hunched forward like it was ready to drop to all 4s. They watched it sniff the air, its head tilting back and forth. And then Richard saw the ears, pointed ears on top of its head, twitching independently like a dog's. The old man's voice was urgent. "Get inside, now." Richard didn't argue. They both moved quickly into the house and the old man locked the door behind them. Through the window, they watched the creature disappear back into the woods. Richard doesn't know who called them, but within 20 minutes, police arrived. Not regular patrol officers either. These came in tactical gear, carrying G-36 assault rifles. Richard recognized the weapons. Those were German army issue, not standard police equipment. The officers spread out through the forest with military precision. They moved like soldiers, like hunters. For 3 hours, they combed through those woods with flashlights and night vision equipment. As they were leaving, Richard and his host watched from the balcony. The officers were doing something strange. They were scanning the ground, kicking dirt and snow over certain areas, covering something up. The next morning, Richard and the old man went to investigate. They searched carefully, and they found one track the police had missed. Richard placed his boot next to it for comparison. He wore a size 10.5, sometimes 11, depending on the manufacturer. The print went from the tip of his toes to mid-heel, but it was wider, much wider than any human foot. And it wasn't human. The toes were elongated with distinct nail marks like a wolf's paw, but scaled up to something massive. Richard kept visiting that area during his time in Germany. He drank with the locals, stayed at the same hostel, but he never forgot what he saw that night. And he noticed something else. The people who lived there, they weren't surprised by his story. They'd heard similar tales their whole lives. They knew something was out there in those woods. Before we continue, I need you to do something for me. If you're finding these stories compelling, if you want to hear more accounts from soldiers who've encountered things they can't explain, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video. And here's the important part. Leave a comment telling me if you've ever experienced something you couldn't rationally explain while serving overseas. Your stories matter. Let's build a community where these experiences can be shared without judgment. Now, let me take you to 1988, Western Germany, a place called Hahn Air Base. It was late autumn, and a group of young airmen decided to spend their evening off base, enjoying the local town. Germany has some excellent bars and restaurants, and these guys wanted to blow off some steam before returning to duty. As they walked back to base along a forest path, they passed a small shrine tucked into the brush. It was old, centuries old, with a carved image of the Virgin Mary. At its center burned a single candle, an eternal flame that local legend said had been burning continuously for over 100 years. The legend claimed the shrine had been placed there to contain the spirit of a werewolf. As long as the flame burned, the beast would remain dormant. But if the flame ever went out, well, the creature would be free to hunt again. The airmen, emboldened by a few drinks, thought this was hilarious. They stood around the shrine, making jokes, calling out challenges to the supposed werewolf, daring it to show itself. Nothing happened. Eventually, they laughed it off and continued back to base. But here's the thing they didn't notice. That night, for the first time in living memory, the eternal flame had gone out. A few hours later, members of the 50th Security Police Squadron were settling into their shift. It was a routine night at Hahn Air Base, or at least it started that way. One of the foot patrols was doing a sweep of the wooded areas inside the perimeter when they radioed in. They'd found 3 dead deer. The patrol leader went to investigate, and what he found disturbed him. The deer's throats had been torn open. 2 of them had their hindquarters completely eaten, along with what appeared to be their internal organs. Hearts, livers, everything. The base had wild boars in the area. Sometimes they'd attack smaller deer, but this looked different, more aggressive, more thorough. They called the Forestmeister, basically a forest ranger, to come remove the carcasses. The patrol leader went back to the security trailer to log the incident. That's when they heard it, a low, resonating howl coming from the center of the base. The patrol leader radioed the foot team that was still out there. "Did you guys hear that?" The response came back frantic. They'd heard it clearly, and it sounded close. The howl came again. This time, it was inside the perimeter fence. One of the security police made a joke. "What if it's the werewolf?" Everyone laughed nervously, but then it howled again, and nobody was laughing anymore. The patrol leader called base operations, informing them they had some kind of large animal loose inside the secure area. Operations confirmed the Forestmeister was on his way and told them to arm up but not to load their weapons. It was peacetime Cold War protocol. Magazines loaded, weapons on safe, but no round in the chamber. The patrol leader took one of the foot teams and headed toward the perimeter. They passed the location where the deer had been found. The 3rd deer, the one that hadn't been eaten yet, was now completely consumed. Whatever this thing was, it had come back to feed while they were organizing their response. One of the mounted patrols radioed in. They'd made visual contact. They were pursuing what they described as a large canine. The patrol leader tried to outflank the creature, running in a wide arc to cut it off. Other units converged from different directions, and then the pursuit changed course. The thing was heading straight for the command trailer. Alpha Control, the officer inside the trailer, immediately got on the radio. He announced he was locking down and wouldn't open the door until sunrise. Everyone else was on their own. The patrol leader repositioned his team to the perimeter fence. The K-9 unit had arrived, so he sent them to guard the secured structures in the center of the base. And then the screaming started. The patrol leader heard his teams yelling over the radio. The creature had changed direction again. It was heading straight toward his position at the fence. He called for the area lighting to be turned on. The floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the fence line. The soldier they'd left at the gate started screaming. The patrol leader and his partner turned just in time to see a massive dark shape clear their 9-foot fence in a single leap. It landed on the other side and disappeared into the darkness beyond the perimeter. The patrol leader moved up a small hill, switching on his night vision scope. He scanned the forest beyond the fence, and then he saw it. The creature was leaning against a tree about 200 meters out, standing on its hind legs like a man, just watching them. He called out its position, 2 o'clock, 200 meters. The creature turned its head slowly, looked directly at them, and then faded back into the forest. Only one other patrol leader saw it clearly. But everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. When the Forestmeister finally arrived, the K-9 unit tried to do a patrol along the fence line. The dog refused. It retreated into its kennel and wouldn't come out, no matter what the handler did. The Forestmeister examined the dead deer. He took photographs, bagged the remains. He told the patrol leader that this didn't look like a typical wild boar attack. The kill patterns, the way the throats were torn, the selective consumption of organs, it all pointed to a wolf attack. But wolves usually don't kill their prey outright. They wound it and let it bleed out. This one had killed efficiently and fed immediately. And yes, wolves could jump a 9-foot fence. This one did. The security police were ordered to write detailed reports of everything they'd witnessed. But the next day, their flight chief pulled them aside with an offer. They could submit their reports as written, complete with references to a possible werewolf encounter. Or they could simplify things, write that a wild animal had killed some deer, the Forestmeister removed them, end of story. The choice seemed simple until the flight chief explained the consequences. If they went with the werewolf angle, their PRP would be called into question. Personnel Reliability Program. It's what allows military members to work around nuclear weapons. Losing your PRP could derail your entire career. They chose the simplified version. Most of them never spoke about it again, but some did. Some couldn't forget what they'd seen. And here's the thing that connects all of this. The legend of the werewolf at Hahn Air Base, what they call the Morbach Monster. It's not just folklore, it's rooted in a documented historical event. In 1812, a deserter from Napoleon's army named Thomas Johannes Baptist Schweitzer was fleeing through Germany with a small group of men. They were hungry, desperate, and dangerous. Near the town of Wittlich, they decided to raid a farmhouse for supplies. But the farmer and his sons fought back. In the chaos, Schweitzer and his men murdered the entire family. The farmer's wife was the last to die. According to legend, with her dying breath, she cursed Schweitzer. Every full moon, she declared, he would transform into a savage wolf. Schweitzer laughed and killed her where she stood, but the curse took hold. Schweitzer began to change. His body twisted into something monstrous, driven by rage and an insatiable hunger for blood. For months, he terrorized the countryside. Livestock slaughtered, people murdered. One young woman named Elizabeth Berrily was attacked on a forest path. He didn't kill her. What he did was worse. The villagers had enough. They organized a hunting party, tracked Schweitzer to the forests near Morbach, and killed him in a brutal confrontation. To ensure his spirit wouldn't return, they decapitated the corpse, drove a stake through its heart, and buried it at a crossroads. Above the grave, they built a shrine with an eternal flame to keep the evil contained. That shrine still stands today on the forest path near Hahn Air Base. And that night in 1988, when those airmen walked past it making jokes, the eternal flame was out. Some people argue these stories can be explained rationally. Maybe the Pale Crawler at Grafenwöhr was just a very tall, thin person with a skin condition. Maybe the creature Richard saw was a trained dog walking on its hind legs. Maybe what happened at Hahn Air Base was just an unusually large wolf. But here's what bothers me about those explanations. They require us to dismiss the testimony of trained military observers. These aren't civilians who caught a glimpse of something in the dark and let their imagination run wild. These are reconnaissance soldiers, snipers, security police. People trained to identify targets, assess threats, and remain calm under pressure. And they all describe the same things. Creatures that move wrong, that sound wrong, that shouldn't exist but somehow do. There's another possibility, one that historians have suggested. Maybe the werewolf legends are how people in the past made sense of something they didn't have the framework to understand. Serial killers. The concept of a serial killer has only been studied within the last 100 years. Before that, people simply didn't have the psychological understanding to explain why someone would commit repeated brutal murders. So when they'd find a scene of carnage, bodies mutilated beyond recognition, they'd rationalize it as the work of a beast. Not a man who'd become a beast, but an actual supernatural creature. Thomas Schweitzer might have just been a psychopath, a man capable of horrific violence who enjoyed inflicting pain. But in 1812, that level of evil seemed impossible to attribute to a human being, so they called him a werewolf. The same thing happened in 1589 with a farmer named Peter Stump. He was accused of being a werewolf, of murdering 14 children and 2 pregnant women over a 25-year period. Under torture, he confessed to practicing black magic, to receiving a magical belt from the devil that transformed him into a wolf. He was executed in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. His flesh torn with hot pincers, his limbs broken, beheaded, his body burned. Modern scholars look at Peter Stump's case and see a serial killer, possibly a scapegoat during religious conflicts in Germany. The werewolf label might have been applied to make sense of crimes that seemed too monstrous for a human to commit. But that still doesn't explain what those soldiers saw in the forests of Grafenwöhr. It doesn't explain what cleared a 9-foot fence at Hahn Air Base. It doesn't explain why trained military dogs refused to patrol certain areas. Germany's forests are ancient. They've stood for thousands of years, predating human civilization in that region. The Romans feared those forests, called them impenetrable and filled with hostile barbarians. Medieval Europeans saw them as the domain of witches and demons. And modern soldiers, armed with night vision and thermal imaging, still encounter things they can't explain. Maybe the old stories are true. Maybe shapeshifters and werewolves aren't just folklore, but something that's been hunting in those forests since long before humans built cities and castles. Maybe the Germans knew something we forgot, and that's why they built shrines and lit eternal flames. Or maybe there's a rational explanation we just haven't discovered yet. What I know for certain is this: the soldiers who shared these stories believe what they saw. They're not looking for attention or trying to create viral content. Most of them stayed silent for years because they knew no one would believe them. Or worse, that reporting their experiences would damage their careers. But the stories keep coming. Every year, more soldiers stationed in Germany have encounters they can't explain. And every year, the legends grow stronger. If you've served in Germany, if you've spent time in those forests during training exercises, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you saw. This community is a place where your experience will be respected, where we can try to make sense of things together. And if you know someone who served overseas, share this video with them. Let's start a conversation about the things we encounter that don't make it into official reports. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because there are more stories coming, more accounts from soldiers around the world who've seen things that challenge everything we think we know about reality. Stay vigilant out there. And remember, Sometimes the old legends exist for a reason.